So in my last hot take video, or I guess as I'm calling them base takes now, I saw somebody in the comments recommend, hey, why don't you talk about whether or not Tamamo actually still has a lot of value or if she's irrelevant in the current arts meta. And I was kind of toying with the idea because I did just make a Tamamo servant review video a couple of weeks ago, but that was more or less talking about why Tamamo is good. The question of her being irrelevant or not is a completely different question, and because I'm a huge Tamamo fan, I mean, her route in Extella is one of my favorite things ever in Fate. I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna miss out on another chance for me to just gush over this servant because answer, no, she's not irrelevant. We're gonna break that down in today's video. You can still use her in things, it's just there's a specific skill buff that I would love for her to get, that if they give that to her, people will be like overnight seeing how broken this servant is. But if there's another topic that you would like to see me cover in one of these base takes videos, make sure you drop that in the comments down below. And while you're down there, make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel for that sweet daily FGO content, and consider checking out some of those links in the description, like my Twitch link where I stream every weekday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But with all that being said, let's just start diving right into this because I'm just ready to crush the naysayers on this. Okay, maybe that's a little too aggressive, but I'm ready to just prove why Tamamo is not bad, all right? So first and foremost, let's talk about the farming thing, right? Because farming is the main thing you're doing in FGO. It's what you're going to be doing like 95% of the time, whether it's free quests, dailies, events, whatever have you, right? Even some of the story quests can be turned into farming nodes, right? It's what you're going to be trying to do for the most part, and Tamamo not having a main battery on any of her skills that she's able to give to someone or give to the entire party is definitely the biggest hindrance that she has right now. But I want to kind of demonstrate how good Tamamo could get if they even just gave her like a 20% party battery on this, or if they gave this like a 30% battery to whoever you gave it to, right? And the reason I specifically even say 20% to the party on the second skill, because that's what Lady Avalon has, right? And you can use Lady Avalon in farming setups because as long as you're just getting a couple of little bits of NP here and there and you're giving a fat arts buff for that NP gain and the damage, you're gonna go like 500 miles, right? It's one of those things of like, you give an art servant an inch and they take it like 5,000 miles, right? They're just so good at extending how good they can refund their NP and whatnot. So I just wanted to demonstrate how much damage you could actually start doing with Tamamo setups if they were to just give her anything like that. So over here we have pulled up Nero Bride. It could literally be any art servant, right? It doesn't really matter. It's just Nero Bride's a really simple servant because all she gives herself is the 40% attack buff. I have the damage mod, but I'm not going to include it because let's just keep it as basic as possible, right? The damage mod might affect some of the numbers and everything because it's going to add another buff type into the mix and it might just inflate some things. But we have 100% arts buff here, right? Because it doesn't matter if we're going to be doing double Castoria or Castoria plus Tamamo. The servant is still going to have a 100% arts buff regardless, right? Because Castoria offers 50%, Tamamo offers 50%. And then Nero Bride over here gives herself at base 40% attack, so we have that included. And then we have the 20% attack from our first main Castoria that we're using over here. So we've exhausted her buffs. Let's take a look if we just add another Castoria into the mix. That's going to be another 20% attack buff. Whoops, another 20% attack buff, bringing it up to 80%. With our 100% attack buff. That's going to raise our damage a little bit here up to 125 on average, right? If you guys don't know how damage in FGO works, you basically have a gacha in the gacha when it comes to your damage. That you have low rolls, high rolls, and average rolls. If you look at things like, say, the NP damage chart over here, they go with a lot of the average rolls, right? Because it's just kind of the easiest thing to do. And, you know, we always just take averages generally when it comes to math. But we're hitting some pretty decent numbers, right? Like, we're doing some decent damage, right? For an NP1 servant, not bad. But let's say we take that away, we go back down to 60% because we're just going to be representing our one Castoria and our Nero Bride's buffs. But then let's take into account that Tamamo is going to be giving us a 30% NP damage buff, which is not only larger than the Castoria 20% charisma that you can see over here, but it's also a different buff type, and it's going to allow us to triple buff. And you can see that the damage actually gets pretty high just because of this triple buff and it already just innately being a bigger buff as well. You could jump up to 144 here. And that's kind of the magic of being able to use Tamamo, is that she just has this ability that even though she doesn't have the 50% battery that Castoria has over here, she is still able to massively gas up the damage, because that NP damage buff is just, it's not only bigger than the charisma, but it's also just a different buff type. So you're getting so much more damage from it. And the only real way for a double Castoria setup to out damage this Tamamo setup is if you use the NP, which is not unlikely, but if we come over here and we look at her NP, it gives you a 30% attack buff, meaning in total with one of the Castorias, in addition to their charisma firing, they fire the NP on, let's say, turn 3, which is not uncommon. You'd be hitting a 110% attack buff with your 100% arts buff. And you'll see that even then, you kind of just barely out damage it, but it is something you're able to commonly do. Because remember that Castoria over here gives 30% to the entire party. 30% plus 30% means both of your Castorias are at baseline going to be at 60% NP, meaning they only need 2 Arch Chains by wave 3 to go ahead and fire their NP in front of whoever NP you're going to be firing to try to finish the node. And it's not uncommon given that she herself just has 3 Arts cards floating around, let alone your own NP card that the farming servant's going to be using and their own innate arts cards, right? So it's not impossible to do. It is something that a lot of people actually generally do whenever they're going to do farming setups. You'll see me do it on stream sometimes if I feel like the servant needs the extra damage or I just want to see bigger numbers. It's just something that generally can happen, but it's not as much of a thing that happens in Tamamo setups, because someone might be saying, well, you could do the same thing in a Tamamo setup. You could fire Castoria's NP in a Tamamo setup, right? And that's technically true, right? If you're playing, say, an event where you have like a 50% starting charge NP, your Castoria plus the 50% and the 30% that she gives herself into the entire party would be at 80%. You only need to find 1 Arch Chain, and then your Tamamo chain is going to be just back on top, right? But if you're in a normal setup, right, where you don't have a 50% starting charge CE, like let's say you're using Castoria's Bond CE, or you're doing like a Bronze setup, right? The Bronze CEs usually don't give you any starting gauge. It might be a little bit harder. That's why I would love it if they would give Tamamo like a little bit of a buff, just tossing her like 20% to the party or even 30% targetable, stuff like that could really help her out and at least making her a little bit more viable. But that's kind of it. That's the hard part, talking about farming, because that's really the main thing that Tamamo struggles with, is that she is really hard to use in farming setups, and that's like the main thing you're doing. But I guess you could also just say that, well, you could use her as like a plug suit person. The problem is that she has very high team cost as a 5-star, and generally you want to be running a max CE setup, and you might just not have enough team cost to run a bunch of 5-stars plus a bunch of like 4 or 5-star CEs. That could be the problem. Otherwise, yeah, she'd be like a really good pseudo Oberon, I guess, before he comes out, as just kind of like an extra damage steroid, giving that large NP damage buff with an additional arts buff. That could be really, really nice. But the farming thing out of the way, right? Because once we kind of get past that, that's kind of the main hurdle that Tamamo has, is that you can't really use her in farming. We can start talking about like challenge quest, more difficult content. She excels at doing that, because when you start to look at Tamamo's kit from that perspective, it's like she does a lot of things that Castoria just does not do, and I think that's really good. That's not a dig at Castoria. Remember, I went NP3 for Castoria. I love this servant, okay? I'm a huge Saberface simp. I love all of my Artorias, so I'm not like trying to take a dig at her and anything, but it's just very nice. It was almost intentionally designed to kind of have Tamamo and Castoria balance out each other, because originally the setups were like Tamamo Waver, right? And Tamamo and Waver kind of did some similar things with a little bit of differences here and there with like the arts buffs from Tamamo, but they both did like the drain thing and all of that one. Like there was a little bit of similarities, right? But with Castoria and Tamamo, what I'm getting at is that there seems to be more of a synergy between the two, because not only does Castoria still give the 50% that Waver was giving, but now they're giving actual good buffs for those arts teams, right? The extra arts damage, the NP gain, right? All of that good stuff. Their NP is very good for survivability. Not that Waver's isn't, but it just feels more synergistic between the two. It's like Tamamo found their perfect partner, right? Because Castoria focuses on having heavy survivability, like kind of just giving the party a lot of buffs and focusing on keeping them alive and being able to take big attacks, cleansing their buffs and all that stuff, but they have no sustainability. They don't offer any HP refund or anything, and that's kind of one of the weak points and why Lady Avalon was so insane when she came out. But Tamamo was already doing stuff like that. I mean, for one of Tamamo's main methods of survivability is being able to reduce the enemy's NP gauge. Let's say the enemy has a way to yeet all of your buffs off of you. Tamamo still has a way to interact with the opponent and prevent them from even firing that NP at you in the first place, which I think is really good. She offers a buff type after they upgraded her to give her something that I'm assuming they knew that they were going to be putting out Castoria, and they were like, you know what, we're going to throw this out there and we're going to go ahead and give her this NP damage buff because that's something she's not going to offer. And that just, again, fits very well. You saw how much the damage actually goes up when you're triple buffing yourself between the massive arts buff, the attack buff, especially in conjunction if you fire Castoria's NP, and a really good NP damage buff that she's going to be giving everybody. The second skill, this is one that I think needs to actually get buffed, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. It's nice because it gives her some big, thick defense for a turn. It kind of keeps Tamamo around, but this definitely does need to have something thrown onto it to make it a bit better. And while they do share the ability to both give somebody an arts buff, I feel like that is just warranted. Like, yeah, no duh, your art support should both probably have a big arts buff they can give somebody, but she also gives you some sustainability by giving them a nice 2500 heal, which again is something that Castoria doesn't offer. But then on the NP, she also gives everybody some HP from 2 to 3k. I feel like you're fine at NP 1 because a 2k heal is going to get you a long way when Castoria is making everybody immune to damage, right? Like, so any little bit of HP that you lose, she can kind of give you back, but then she's reducing the cooldown, giving you 25% bare minimum. It's just very, very powerful, right? Because some of these Castoria skills, right, are very strong, like the extra NP gain to the entire party so everybody can be firing their NPs more consistently. Again, it's that synergy of like Tamamo wants to fire her NP as often as possible, and so giving this nice NP gain to the entire party while also giving 30% to everybody is just making it easier for her to hit that NP, right? And then you can start spamming really strong skills like this, which is just an invincibility whenever you want, more arts damage. If you're fighting a threat against humanity, more special damage mod. It's just a lot of good stuff. You can start spamming the skills of your main arts DPS. And it's why I don't think Tamamo is irrelevant. Like, I still try to use Tamamo whenever I can. Mine is unfortunately 111 on one account and 444 on the other one because I don't have any of her materials. I don't know how I've run out of all of this stuff, or not, of this stuff down here. I think it's mainly the bones on both accounts. I don't know how they've both just run out of those. I don't know how I'm having that problem on simultaneous accounts, but I really want to get her done and maxed out because whenever I say bring a friend to Tamamo and use my Castoria for any difficult content, it just feels really good. It feels like I already had a pretty good machine, but then Tamamo is that good oil that is just getting everything nice and greased up, and it's making sure everything runs really smoothly. Can you get really bad RNG sometimes because you always want to be seeing Tamamo's arts cards? Yeah, you can get really bad RNG where it's like, you get like Tamamo's Buster card and her quick card, and then Castoria's quick card, and like the two random Buster cards from your DPS. Sometimes you're going to have bad things like that, but generally once you get into the groove of thing, you can generally control the cards that you're going to be seeing. You can control like how often you'll be seeing your arts cards and stuff. And with a bunch of arts and Ps being in rotation, it shouldn't be that bad. Just sometimes maybe your start might be a little bit rough. I can understand that, but I don't think she's irrelevant. I think there's a reason why a lot of players for the anniversary on NA are going to be picking up Tamamo if they don't have her already, because they recognize that she's a really, really good servant. And I think we all know, don't lie to me, we all know that if they buff this skill and they gave it like 20% NP to the entire party, or they made this a targetable like 30 to 50% battery, people would be like, she's the most broken thing ever overnight. Like, people would just be clamoring for this servant. Because if you've ever used her in more difficult content, yeah, is it a little annoying that you can't immediately activate like the party NP gauges, have it immediately? Yeah, but once you start getting it going, it's kind of like Merlin in a way. Like, once you get the arts machine running, it just doesn't stop. You just start spamming NPs all over the place, and you kind of get into the style of gameplay that Arts wants to do, and that is just spam NP turn after turn after turn after turn after turn. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I do not think Tamamo is irrelevant. The whole point of the beginning of the video was me just showing that, yeah, like, if we could just get Tamamo to have any relevance when it comes to farming, she would be really, really good in those setups, because this NP damage buff does a lot more than people know, and I had to visualize it by showing one of the calcs. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. Any future topics you want me to talk about, drop those in the comments down below. For anybody that might do it, I've already done a video talking about if Quick was dead or not, so, you know, if you're going to drop that, already did that. I should be putting these all in a playlist as well, so if you want to check them out as it grows larger and larger, you can go ahead and do that. Leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace, late guys.